Hello again, it's Noob, and today we get to look at the Sparrows Sidewinder, which is a practice lock, and this was kindly sent me by Sparrows Lockpicks for the purposes of this review, and I'll get to keep it at the end. And for full disclosure, I have worked with Sparrows in the past to come up with some cool designs, and I hope to continue to work with them in the future. So, yeah, this is the Sidewinder. It's one of the sort of new version of the Sparrows practice locks, if any of you remember the old ones. It has a key in there. As you can see, you align the lock symbol on the Sparrows logo to the top, and that'll allow you to remove the key, and you would pick it just like a normal lock. But you can also see on the side, as well as that Sidewinder logo on the lock, there is something with these little tabs which you can pull off. And if you do that, you'll see that you have access to the key pins, just like that. So you'll be able to literally tip these out, hopefully one by one. I'll put my finger over there and tip one out so you can see. And I'll do that one by one to make sure you keep them in the same position. And yeah, you'll be able to just pop these in. And as long as it turns, you know you've got them, and they're all level, you know you've got them right in there. And why would that be important? Well, let's have a look inside here, and you'll see that there's all sorts of little bits, but at the bottom there's a few bags with some keys in and other little bits. So you can see we've got a blank key, so if you have a file you can make your own key. Then you have 3 other keys with different bittings. So we have a sort of a graduated bitting going from at the bottom, sort of a very long key pin or a low cut, all the way to a high cut or a very short key pin. Then we've got one which is sort of a relatively flat bitting, although there's some ups and downs towards the end here. And then we have another one which is almost the opposite of the first key, starting out with a low cut and going up to a high cut. So this Sidewinder will allow you to rapidly change the pinning of the lock. Now bear in mind, if you change the pinning of this lock and you're not using one of these keys, any key you put in there will not work, and you'll have to pick it to get it back open again. It might not even turn open if you've got the pins in there. So yeah, use the keys if you don't know what you're doing to begin with, and then work your way up. Also bear in mind that these are pinned to 4 positions, which means that you don't have driver pins and a spring in the 6th position. So if you were to put a key pin in that position or take one out, you want to make sure that you either add or remove a driver pin and a spring accordingly. Right, let's have a go at changing to a different key. So I would make sure that you have something appropriate to put all your pins and your key on. Move this out of the way. I'm going to pull a little pinning tray over and get my tweezers, and you'll want to carefully study the key to make sure that you know the way that the pins are going to be, starting at the tip of the key, which is going to be the back. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pin cuts here. So we've counted that up. It's be the shortest, followed by the next longest, and then the next longest, and then the next longest, and then the next longest. So we should be able to make a good approximation by eye, and once they are lined up and you're happy that this is the way that it would sit in there, then we can swap the key and the pins out from this one. So I'm just going to do the same. Really, I've done this so that it's just like that, like it is on the key. And to keep it the same, I'm just going to tip these pins out. So just make sure that we line the gaps up. Tip out the first pin. There we go. That's the happens to be the 3rd pin from the back. Doesn't really matter which order, as long as you know which order you're tapping these out. There we go. That's the 4th pin, and then we're just left with that last pin there. Right, so you can see just from this that the 2 sets of pins are going to be different. like that, and we can just pop these back in. So I can remove the key and put in my new key, grab my tweezers and just gently pop these in, making sure that you populate these into the correct chambers and don't go into chamber 6, for example, when you only have a 5-pin key and you're pinning to 5, especially if you haven't put in some driver pins and a spring at the back. Also, what you want to make sure is that you don't miss out. I mentioned it earlier, but it's important. If you miss out a key pin, turn this when there's a driver pin in here. The spring's going to push that driver pin down into the keyway and maybe the top of the spring, which means that it might feel like it's turning. When you do turn it, you'll feel resistance because the top of the spring, or the bottom of the spring here, is going to get trapped in the core and damage the spring. So you do have to just be aware of what you're doing when you're repinning this lock, and you'll see that this now works perfectly fine. I've completely given this a new bitting. I'll just pop this cover on to make sure that I don't do anything silly and turn the lock and then turn this and they all drop out. But yeah, we are completely repinned. The old key won't work anymore because it's got different bitting. So why would we want to change the bitting? Well, if you've been practicing picking a lock with, just say, this bitting, you might want to give yourself a new challenge, because one of the biggest factors in a lock's pick resistance is the different cuts on the key. So for example, you had a low cut followed by a high cut, or a couple of high cuts followed by a low cut, that will be a lot harder to pick because the longer pins won't need lifting as high, and if you have a short pin after that, then you'll have to pick that higher, and that means you have to use maybe a deeper hook, and it just provides that extra challenge. If you didn't mind the keys working or not, once you picked a lock, then you'll be able to just take off the cover, dump the pins out, throw in a different bitting, get a friend to do it for you if you want to be surprised by it or don't want to know what the bitting is. Lock it back up. The key won't work necessarily, especially if you haven't used the key to pin this up with, and then you'll pick it, and then once you pick it, you can again dump the pins, change them around, whatever it is, as long as you are only pinning to 5 unless you've populated pin chamber 6. You could also, of course, remove a couple of pins and the pins and springs up here in the Bible to progressively pin a lock for practice. So you might want to just start with 4 pins, for example, in the lock. If you do ever want to change the number of key pins you can rapidly change out at any time, then you will have to make sure that the chambers at the top have driver pins and springs in for every key pin you have. If you remove any, you want to progressively pin this lock, just as I said earlier, you'll have to remove some of the chambers full of driver pins and springs to the same number of key pins, and you will have to make a mental note of how many driver pins and springs you have in the top to correspond with the number of pins that you're able to put in at the bottom at any given time. So if you want to do that, you can gut this just as you would any of the Sparrows practice locks. You'll just first of all remove the back, which with this tool, which I think is a Sparrows tool, is actually really quick to do. You don't have to do this, you can use some pliers and a pick to do that, and then again, if you haven't picked it, you'll have to put in a key, then follow the core out like that, and then you're ready to add or remove some pins. So if I wanted to make this a 4-pin lock, say I wasn't very comfortable picking a 5-pin lock, I'll just take out one of the pins. So it's now 4 pins, and I'll have to take out from the back of this the corresponding number of pins I removed from the bottom. So that's just 1. So you can see that pin chamber 6 there is empty anyway, so I'll just remove the pin from chamber 5 and tip out the spring. Again, very important. Now we've done that, we can just put this very quickly back together. So I will just slide this on like that to the back, add in the sort of locking pin here and the retaining ring. and we are ready to go, and we'll be able to pick a 4-pin lock just now, and the key will work. It's just that this 5th chamber won't be populated, so all works fine. If you wanted to then add another pin, as I said before, you'll need to add it back in these pins here, well, at least the top pins, and a new key pin. And for the 6th pin chamber, again, you have to add another spring, another drive pin, and then a key pin at the bottom. Because of the size and shape of this lock, it's actually quite comfortable to hold in your hand while you pick, although you could put that in a vise to make it more comfortable or more practical if you so wish. We'll just give this a bit of a pick. This is only pinned to 4 standard pins, so I don't think it's going to take us a very long time to pick into this, but there we go. It's definitely just a bit of fun, isn't it? I've repopulated all 5 chambers now, and I want to see how quickly I can go back to the original key bitting. So let's give this a go. Pop in the key, give it a turn, take this off. We're going to just dump out all the pins in one go, so they're all out. We can then go back in with a new key, and this will allow us to check that the bitting is going to be correct and back to it was originally. And hopefully this will demonstrate really this lock's strength, which is that you can rapidly change the bitting of the lock to give yourself a greater or lesser challenge. I mean, that really did take seconds. Apart from the 3 bags of differently bitted keys and corresponding key pins that you get in the Sidewinder kit, you also get spare springs. Very useful, just in case you do something silly and you end up damaging a spring or 2. Spare springs, super handy. You also get a spare back cover spring and pin for when you're gutting your lock. I know if you lose one of those, I don't know how you would, but you might do, I guess. You have a blank key, which I did mention earlier, which you will have to file down to your own bitting if you have the tools, knowledge and skills to do so. A spare cover just in case you damage or lose that, which is really nice. And most importantly, and one we're going to just have a look at, are these are serrated key pins. I think that this is a first for Sparrows lockpicks in terms of providing a different style of key pin to standard key pins with their practice locks. And you see these little serrations at the tops of the pins. That means that if you overset them, they're going to trap themselves at the shear line, and you'll have to reset the lock and start picking again. So that is really cool, and you can swap these out for any one of the key pins in here in any position that you wish, which is really nice. You get a whole load of different sizes of these as well, from short to long and everything in between. So that is the Sparrows Sidewinder, but that's not all that Sparrows sent me to review and keep. Sparrows sent me some of these. These are the Sparrows bulk pins. These are sets of security driver pins, and there's mushroom pins, serrated pins and spool pins. There are 100 of them each in these little boxes, but it isn't just within the little boxes. Inside these little boxes are these really cute sort of medicine jars or apothecary jars. Look at that, 100 mushroom pins. Look at that. They look great. They generally do. I actually like them as an object. And you can put these, of course, in any of the Sparrows practice locks as driver pins, not key pins, just to make that very clear. Here are the serrated pins. Look at that. Just looks so cute. 100 of them in each of these little jars. And you can even put these in other locks where they have compatible pin chambers that can take these pins at your own risk, of course. And here are the spool pins, 100 of those. It's been quite difficult for a lot of hobby pickers with practice locks to find decent amounts of spool pins, mushroom pins, serrated pins, and this allows you to do that. So these come as 3 little jars as a set, the Sparrows bulk pins, and that is really cool. We'll have to take one apart, though. We just take the top off one and just pour all of those out into my hand. That's so cool. Yeah, love it. So I think it's time for some conclusions. Let's start with the Sidewinder. This is really novel. I've never seen a lock where the whole purpose of it is so you could rapidly change the bitting at any given time on the fly to give yourselves different challenges and add in those serrated key pins, those overset traps as you want. That is really interesting. It's certainly an interesting lineup for the Sparrows practice locks that are available. There's plenty of different variants that they do. I really like the presentation in the tin. I like all the extras you get, especially these serrated key pins. I mean, there are spares of everything in here, which I really appreciate, especially the springs as well, because if you don't pay attention, then it's quite easy to forget how many pin chambers you've loaded up at the top and those kind of things, or at the bottom, and you might bend a few springs along the way. So having the spares really helps, which I think is probably the main negative on this, is just you do need to have a little bit of knowledge about how locks work and why you need to match the bottom chambers and the top chambers when you're repinning a lock. You need to understand that and what will happen if you don't. Otherwise you can end up kind of just messing up a load of springs and getting yourself in a position where you have to pick the lock because the key won't work, those kind of things. So I think this is really, really, really good for people who just want a practice lock, not have to carry around a kit to gut the lock and repin it from the back, or carry a hex key to repin it from the top if that's the type of lock it is. This you can basically just carry around a whole bag of key pins along with this lock, and just repin it, pick it, repin it, pick it, repin it, pick it, get somebody else to repin it, pick it again. So from that standpoint, there's a lot of flexibility with this, and it is like really good tool for practicing different bittings. However, at the cost of, you will need to know a little bit about how locks work first to make sure that you get the most out of this tool and don't get frustrated with mispinning the lock, if that makes any sense. Looking on the Canadian and American Sparrows websites, this is currently on sale at the time of filming at $25 US or 26 Canadian dollars for the Sidewinder set, the tin, all the stuff that comes in it, and the lock. In terms of the bulk pins, slightly different pricing depending on whether you go to the US site or the Canadian site. On the US site, the bulk pins, 300 pins in these cute little jars, are all going to be about $19.95 at the time of filming, or $24.95 Canadian on the Canadian website. In terms of concluding with this, there's not much I can really say. It's a pretty decent set of bulk driver pins. So if you want a load of security pins for your own challenge locks, for your own practice locks, if you make challenge locks or anything like that, or you want to have spares to renovate some locks that you have, then these are really, really good ways of just grabbing yourself a load of those security pins. I can't really think of any negative things to say about them because they are just what they are. And I know it sounds really weird, but one of the big positives for me, just being somebody who likes locks and just having things that remind me of locks and things on display, I just like these little jars. I think they're kind of cute. So whether that's a good enough reason for you to buy one, I don't know, but certainly if you're into having the bunch of serrated pins, spool pins and mushroom pins to go into your practice locks or challenge locks, then this is where you can get some. In particular, it's very hard to find things like serrated pins and mushroom pins in many other places. I find there might be a few places out there, but yeah, this is a really nice addition to the Sparrows lineup for those of us who like to have a whole bunch of security driver pins. So there you go, that's my review of the Sidewinder and the bulk pins. I'd really like to know what you think. If you are a beginner, do you think the Sidewinder will help you to practice different bittings? What do you like it? Do you not like it? Whatever you think, put the comments below. I do read them all, reply to as many as I can. So there you are. Those are my thoughts. I'll be really interested to know yours. What do you think to the Sidewinder and the bulk pins? So there you go. Those are my thoughts. please let me know yours below. I do read all the comments and reply to as many as I can. If you did like this video, leave a like. If you haven't subscribed, now's a great time to do so. And of course, I will see you all next time.